And joining me now to explain some of the time-honoured traditions that we see played out in the show is CEO and founder of Polo and Tweed and etiquette expert Lucy Challenger. Good morning, Lucy. How are you?
Good morning, Lisa. I'm very well. How are you?
You look idyllic. I mean, when you say the CEO and an etiquette, founder, it really speaks volumes. I'm expecting to see a waft of apple pie coming from that kitchen there in Reading.
Absolutely, I can smell it. Cooking in the background.
Your house looks idyllic. Now, obviously, with Bridgerton, everybody's excited. I mean, my goodness, anyone that knows the series, I think it's been more eagerly anticipated to see season 2 than even season 1.
Absolutely, I'm very excited. I cannot wait.
Now, in terms of obviously today, what we want to look at is etiquette. And, you know, the season itself is almost like a finishing school because there's so many do's and don'ts that the characters adhere to. Talk us through some of them and what you've observed from the series.
Sure. So let's start with what is etiquette. Well, etiquette in itself is a code of behaviour which you typically find in formal or polite settings. And of course, we see this from the Regency era where Bridgerton is set. But of course, we find etiquette in modern times, you know, in weddings, in formal dinner parties, queuing for a cash point or a bus on the high street. Etiquette is everywhere. And of course, etiquette exists so that members of the court can show their status. And this is very important, particularly in the Regency era, that your status is reinforced and that you don't bring dishonour or shame to your family.
Now, back in my day in school, which was back in the 1800s, I did an etiquette class. And it was hilarious, Lucy, you know, because obviously you're trying to get girls or women, young women, to try and, you know, do the do's and don'ts of modern day society, which, you know, it was difficult enough. One of them, which actually I was looking at the notes and I was like, yeah, we did learn this, is no laughing or shouting. So discuss this one and what exactly happens in Bridgerton with this.
Sure. So the women in the Regency era were expected to behave in a ladylike fashion. And this meant no extreme showing of emotions. So laughing, crying, shouting, that was a big no-no, particularly when you're out in public, because you represent yourself, you represent your family. So women had to come up with more creative ways to show their displeasure at situations. And you see that with Queen Charlotte in the way she uses her eyeline and the cut, as it was referred to throw shade towards someone, because you couldn't show strong emotions. It was improper to do.
Obviously, we know that the series is very, you know, scandalous. It reminds me very much of Dangerous Liaisons, of course, that movie starring Michelle Pfeiffer. It's also talked about in the eyes. I mean, they very much have a romantic liaison with their eyes. Talk us through that etiquette practice.
Exactly. So that's what I was talking about, how you could throw shade without actually showing emotion. So you would stare at someone and you would show the cut with your eyes. Now, if your social ranking was higher than someone else, this was basically showing your displeasure. It was extremely humiliating for the person receiving the cut. And it was a sign publicly that you were displeased with this person's behaviour.
I mean, there's our own Nicola Coughlan there looking great and, of course, reprising her role. But I suppose number 3 on the list we have is even the carriage rides in those days were kind of minefields, really, for the women, weren't they? Because they weren't even allowed to sit next to the men. So tell us about that. That was a forbidden fruit.
Absolutely. And you might think carriage etiquette was a thing of the past, but actually we still teach carriage etiquette in our etiquette courses because the Queen and some people still have carriages these days. In fact, carriage racing is a very popular pastime and the Queen enters her carriages each year. But thankfully, of course, we use cars nowadays, less than carriages. But back in Regency times, that was how, of course, they got about, by the carriage. Now, the gentlemen would sit with their back to the horses, and it was completely improper for any non-relative to sit next to them in case a stray elbow or knee was to accidentally touch the other person. A woman could ride a horse, but she certainly wasn't allowed to steer or control a carriage herself.
Lucy, let's talk about social gatherings, dinner parties. I mean, a woman could actually, this is back in the day now, everyone has to remember, shame herself by, you know, I suppose, doing one false move at a dinner party. We see it in Emma, Sense and Sensibility, as I mentioned, you know, even The Gilded Age, that's that new series as well, that's out in Sky. There's, you know, that social practice was a real dangerous one. dinner parties.
Absolutely. And also you had to dress a certain way. So if a lady in the Regency period turned up to a dinner party underdressed, that was immediate shame to herself and her family, disregarding the host. The hostess would typically sit at the head of the table for the dinner party with the lead male guest of honor to her right. But it was vital that you navigated the dinner party rules and etiquette and didn't cause shame to yourself and your family. You know, this is the ongoing theme. A woman had to behave in a polite and certain fashion in order to navigate this minefield of rules and etiquettes that existed.
My goodness. Now, the ladies of that era definitely had to suffer for their beauty. Talk us through their clothing. We all know it was highly restrictive. The bodices, the lace, the wigs, the whole gamut.
Mm-hmm. It was, I mean, it's fascinating. And of course, don't forget that modern underwear wasn't invented until the 1920s. So these ladies were wearing beautiful garments, many layers, particularly in the winter months, could become a little bit breezy. And of course, sanitary towels, tampons, things like this weren't invented till the modern day. So they had to navigate around that as well, including not having underwear. So it could become a rather messy affair. But obviously, I'm aware people are probably eating their breakfast at the moment, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. But the umbrella, for example, an accessory, was used as a status symbol. Now, if you remember in season 1, Daphne goes into the village and immediately the villagers become uncomfortable. They aren't sure what to do because they can see her status from that umbrella, because she has this beautiful lace ornate umbrella and it shows her wealth, it shows her status. So women would carry their umbrella through sunshine, through rain, to show their status. The umbrella, of course, is less commonly used now to show our status. I think people use their cars instead.